I want to welcome you to How We Recover. And our theme today is creating a life worth living. I am so excited about this theme. Um, I want to first I want to acknowledge we are here with the Eating Disorder Foundation, and I'm going to hand it over to Lydia, who's just waved here in a moment. I'm Chelsea. If we've never met before, I'm the executive director at Eat, Breathe, Thrive, which is a nonprofit that our mission, similar to EDF, is to help people recover from eating disorders. And we have a special interest in yoga and peer support, which is really what we're doing here today is peer support. I just want to set a really brief context for this theme because it's really probably definitely my favorite theme that we've done so far. A really timely point because it is Suicide Awareness Month. We just passed World Suicide Prevention Day. And this theme was actually inspired by a woman named Marsha Linehan, who you may or may not have heard of. You've probably at least heard of dialectical behavioral therapy, or DBT, which gets used a lot in eating disorders. Marsha Linehan created DBT, and she wrote a book called, I think, it's definitely Life Worth Living. There's Life Worth Living. I think it's How to Live, How to Create a Life Worth Living. It's in the title. But one of the things I love about her work is that it was really born out of her lived experience of suffering, particularly her lived experience of suicidality as a young person. She was in and out of psychiatric centers throughout her childhood. She went through some of the most horrendous treatments, heavy medication, seclusion. She was thought of as like the worst patient on, she says in her book, and really felt really hopeless and helpless. And when she came out of that period, it was actually a few different things, but it was part of it involved a Buddhist monastery, and she was also Catholic, so she spent time in prayer. But when she came out of that period, she decided, and really came out of that period of suffering, she decided that she wanted to go and make her life about helping others. And she went and got a PhD, and her whole focus of work was on helping what was then called seriously suicidal people. The only place she could get money was in research for borderline personality disorder, which is how DBT became really the most widely known and widely recognized treatment for borderline personality disorder, which used to be the thing that no psychologist or psychiatrist wanted to touch, and that, those are the patients you didn't. So she's really destigmatized it. And her whole work has been around saying that the way we come out of that is in building a life worth living. And I don't know about you, but that resonates so much with my own lived experience of an eating disorder. I could not recover until I had a life worth recovering for, or at least a vision of moving toward a life worth recovering for. It had to be more than symptom reduction. So we have gathered these amazing humans here today to talk about their own experiences with this. And we've invited you all here in hopes that you will find some inspiration and connection and resonance in this conversation. So I want to welcome you and hand it over to Lydia.
Awesome. Thank you, Chelsea. Always my favorite kind of discussions are ones that revolve around recovery, but then bringing in other aspects of it, because I think, like Chelsea mentioned, this is such a critical point of the recovery process, is figuring out what life looks like without the eating disorder. But even more than that, like figuring out how we can make our lives all the most fruitful for each of us individually in that. And I know for my journey, it looks very different than kind of the expectations that I had for myself. But really figuring out how that ebbs and flows and how we can make sure we stay aligned with that. I'm just really excited to be in this conversation. I'm really excited to hear everyone's responses to things, and just to feed off of everyone's energy around this. I know we're all so passionate around just bringing awareness to this and making sure folks know that there is like the ability to create that life worth living while in recovery. Like we can do both. Because I think sometimes it feels like we have to have that first before we can really find our recovery. But I think through my own, it's come through the more I've identified in my recovery, it's gotten easier to identify those things that help me feel like I have my life worth living too. So interesting take. But I am the program director at the Eating Disorder Foundation. As Chelsea mentioned with Eat, Breathe, Thrive, focus on peer support. So we do a lot of connecting and making sure that our community stays connected, which is great to see everyone here in the audience today and joining us. Very much love this kind of environment. But I have brought our representative from EDF. Esther, I'll go ahead and allow you to introduce yourself. And then Amanda, if we want to pop over to you and could do a brief introduction, and then I will read our first question of the day.
Hi, thank you so much. I am so happy to be here. I actually got connected with the Eating Disorder Foundation because I volunteer as a mentor, and I've just completely loved the experience. And when I was first asked to do this, I didn't know this would be centered around the dialectical behavioral therapy. And I just wanted to say that that's a therapy modality that I actively sought out during my treatment because I tried different modalities. And um, because in treatment you kind of do experience different kinds. And then for some reason I was like, this Marshall Linehan gets it. And when I went to like a normal kind of mood center, I left and I had to find my own DBT, eating disorder based treatment center. So I just wanted to say, like, I still bring up DBT skills and just everything that I've learned and the techniques with my mentees to this day. So I'm super passionate about this and so happy to be here. I feel like it's serendipitous.
Hi, my name is Amanda Cuyava. I volunteer with Eat, Breathe, Thrive. I've been with them for about 4 years, doing more of the creative side of it. I also work for a school district, and I also volunteer as a mentor with ANID, and I've had many mentees working with them to discover what we're talking about, that creating that life worth living. It's very, very tough to see, especially if your brain is malnourished. It's hard to get out of that dark place. So it's like a balance of trying to just do symptom reduction, but then also, as you're doing that, find those small moments of why life is magical and what those, and even just ordinary life. I think finding the beauty in being average, being ordinary, and finding community especially was important for my recovery. And so helping my mentees see that has been very rewarding for me and has pushed me in my own recovery to stay committed. And it's where I've found my passion for what I care about. And this is why I'm here in this space and will continue to be.
Amazing. Thank you, each of you, our panelists, and also our whole community. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Really excited to get this conversation started. I'm going to bring my little questions over here. Fabulous. So our first question of the morning is, what are some of the key moments in your recovery journey that helped you shift from the deepest moments to surviving and thriving? So want to let everyone take a second to think about it, and then whoever feels called to share first, feel free to do so, and then we'll kind of hop around. I'll read it one more time. What are some of the key moments in your recovery journey that helped you shift from the deepest moments to surviving and thriving?
I can go. So when I think about recovery, I actually just spoke with my mentee about this because she felt like she didn't see progress over the 6 months we worked together. And I'm like, recovery isn't like one day I'm like, I'm recovered from an eating disorder. Or at least for me, I just saw these kind of glimpses. So when I think about those moments that brought me into recovery, I think about, I went camping and we woke up and we had waffles in the woods, and I just thought nothing of it. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're eating some waffles. We're going to go like hike around. We're in nature. I'm with my friends. It's beautiful. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't think about calories or waffles or trying to like compensate or any of those things. And that was like a epiphany moment. And so as I went further in recovery, having more of those moments, that was what brought me out of the darkness. Just knowing that I could have those flashes of insight and what it meant to feel like I could connect with myself and with my loved ones and with nature without those loud thoughts getting in the way. And that voice got quieter and quieter. And so it wasn't this overall like I am recovered. It was those small moments of realizing I can do this. And even if it's for a minute or 30 seconds, I can do it. And you just string those together. And eventually you kind of are out of the black and white and into a more colorful life. And it's beautiful.
Wow, that was amazing. I saw a lot of parallels in my own journey. And, when I thought of this question, I think about key moments. They're really the moments that stand out to you. And because I've been on this journey for 5 years now, and it's so hard to remember the specifics of what it was like in the beginning. I remember that in the beginning, it was all about surviving, it was all about mitigating these behaviors. I had a lot of, thoughts and narratives in my head and patterns that worked against me my whole life. And, we think when we go into treatment that it is about the eating, it's about the food. And I think it's kind of frustrating at times. You'll hear throughout treatment and recovery that it isn't about the food. And you're like, well, it kind of is because I'm kind of obsessed with it. But when you actually get the behaviors in check and you start diving deep in, hopefully there's therapy that's kind of involved in that uh, treatment modality that you're in. But you start to realize that there are deeper things that have contributed to me being here. And I think that's the hardest part. And when I started to get these behaviors in check, for me, it was all about trusting the process. For so long, I trusted my eating disorder, trusted what it was telling me, trusted the promises it gave me. And I had 30 years of realizing I had relied on my eating disorder and pushed everything else out, made it the biggest priority. And yet I don't have anything, the love, the acceptance, the belonging that I thought that I would get. And so I think that's what worked for me. And that's what I saw it throughout when I was just like, I think I have an upper hand actually. I hear a lot that people are sad that they wasted their lives, sad that they waited so long to go into treatment. But when you realize that you have something to lose and you really understand the gravity of that, then you take it seriously. And so when I started noticing, like, okay, I've trusted the process, trusted what my dietitians are telling me, the therapists are telling me, the groups are telling me, started doing the little homework assignments that they give you where you're like, this is it, this is what I'm supposed to like do at the end of the day. I have bigger fish to fry, but I was like, okay, I'll do the homework. And bit by bit, as Amanda said, I also started to see this epiphanies, the 1% shifts just add up to moments when you wake up and you're like, wait, I can't believe that I'm doing this. Like Amanda said, I can't believe I'm going camping and not really thinking about these things. I can't believe I'm like opening up to people and being vulnerable. That was one of my biggest challenges when I was in my eating disorder. And I think when I started to notice that I woke up less plagued by the eating disorder and the patterns that I was in, and more like supported by all of these things that I had trusted and implemented in my life, that's when I was just like, this works. I don't know. And, it's true. The recovery is not like there's no end point. It's a constant progress, it's a constant journey. But I think what makes it worth it is waking up one day and being like, whoa, like 1% shift. I see this, I'm living it. Let's keep going. And that's what inspires me to this day, to keep motivating people to keep trying and keep working.
Beautiful, Esther. I feel like what you said about vulnerability and connecting with other people really resonates with me. And when I think about those kind of pivot moments and shift moments, the theme, I can think of them actually, even though for me it's been a really long time. It's been like 19 years about, but they're really vivid in my mind, the scenes, and they're all moments where I took a little risk that brought me out of isolation. And isolation was I couldn't see it at the time, but it was a really big driver of my eating disorder. And it also, like, the eating disorder made me more isolated. The more in it I was, the further away from people I was. I have these just really vivid moments that were really pivot points that were sometimes just down to serendipity. Like, my sleep cycle used to get really off, and because I think I wasn't eating enough. And so my sleep cycle was so off. I was up until like 3, 4 in the morning some nights. And then I would like sleep until 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It made it very hard to connect with people or, have a normal eating schedule. And I remember one night I'd had like a really late nap. And by the time I woke up, it was like 7 or 8 p.m. And I think I probably just wanted to do some exercise. Really, like, looking back at it was probably what it was. I remember, but I was like, I want to see if I can find a yoga class. And I went to a yoga studio for the first time, and it was an 8 or 9 p.m. class. So it was really late, and I was the only person who showed up. And I could have just left, but the teacher kind of sat down and started talking to me. And I ended up in this like 45-hour-minute conversation with this teacher. And it was quite a connection. And then I left, and she said, why don't you come back for class tomorrow morning at like 6:30 a.m. I was like, there's no way. No way. Also, I've just like poured my soul to you and I never want to see you again, So like there was that. But she said, I'm going to lay out a yoga mat for you. I'll see you at 6:30 in the morning. And I have chills. Yeah. And you know what? I took that risk and I went back, and she became one of the most important people in my life. Like, she was a mentor. I did my yoga teacher training under her. That studio became a source of connection. But that's just one. I can think of multiple little moments, but the theme was taking the risk because everything in me was like, no, no. But life delivers those little moments of choice and opportunity and serendipity. And you got to push a little past your everything in you that's protective, but it's taking those risks, that connections that really made a huge difference in my recovery.
I just got chills when you were sharing that, Chelsea. I was like, oh my gosh, like that's so brave to, like to do that. And for her, like the yoga teacher to like see that in you and to say like, I'm going to do this for you. And like, I will see you then, I think just kind of like puts that like a perspective, right? On being like, oh, I can show up. I can do that. That's what I've been thinking about, is like the ownership that I think I've had over my journey. And as you all were sharing, I was just thinking that I was like, oh, I think some of the like biggest moments were like early on in my experience, and like when I was leaving treatment, from the time that like I really count as like my kickoff to my recovery. I did family therapy. I asked to do it with my friends that I was going to be moving in with when I left treatment. And I think opening up that conversation to like my friends and my peers and saying like, hey, I'm going to need your help if I'm going to do this, and I want this to stick, and I want to do really well. And I need to tell you about what that looks like, and I need to ask for help, and I need to make sure I'm not doing it alone. And then that branched into like this beautiful relationship that I ended up developing with like my friends that I lived with a dietitian and a therapist that I started working with, and being able, like, I remember setting like a meal goal for myself and being able to like talk about it with my dietitian and then go back and be like, I did it. Like, I did not think that I was going to be able to do that. And it gave me like that platform of confidence, which now I feel like I do that with every scenario that I'm up against. Like, I've had some pretty tragic things happen the last like 5 years. So I was like, oh, but I think having that foundation of like, okay, I remember when I set that goal for myself and I met it back, however many years ago that was, 9, 10 years ago, that it like almost has given me that place of saying like, okay, I have the data. I know that I've set a goal for myself before, and I've been able to step over something that's been like a really big challenge for me. And I feel like the more in my recovery, I keep doing that. I keep coming up against obstacles that I'm like, oh, this is too much. I can't handle this. I'm not capable of doing it. I should just step aside and kind of just like, make myself smaller and just hope that the problem goes away. And I think that relying on those early times of vulnerability and saying like, you know what, this is a challenge for me. I'm going to name it. I'm going to work with people around me to tackle it. And then I'm going to keep going. And I think that I've like built my life almost on that, of just like a challenge comes, I'm going to just confront it and move through. And that I feel like has just helped me like go from surviving to thriving. So I think that the survival, like I just would hit that point of being like, this is too much. And then now I'm like, okay, I can hit that and then pass it. And it's so cool to think about that. Like, I don't know if I ever thought about that process before really like breaking it down to something like a goal, like a challenge meal that I wanted to do on my own and be able to get myself to that. And now I'm like, yeah, now I can just have that meal whenever I want. And it's just freeing. It feels very much just like full circle kind of moment. Oh, I love these memories. Thank you.
Beautiful, Lydia. Okay, I'm gonna go straight to our next question, and I apologize, I'm going a little off script here, but I really want to ask this question. One of the things that's really struck me, especially this month, because there's been increased conversation around suicide prevention, is that in the throes of an eating disorder, it can feel incredibly bleak. It can feel really, really dark. And sometimes you're in it for so long that it can just feel like, what am I even doing? Like, why am I even continuing? This is, it's taken away so many of the things in my life that I want to live for. So I want to ask you, how have you emerged from that? How have you created a life worth living from those moments? Because I have to imagine that you each had an experience of that at some point or another.
I can go. I didn't know that I was going to get so emotional. Just everybody's shares are just hitting home, and it's just so amazing to see that like everybody's recovery journeys are different, but we're all people. We're all connected by our pain, and this um, the challenges are what unite us. And I got really emotional, Chelsea, when you talked about the risk of opening up and being vulnerable. I mean, I remember being in groups and just I've kept secrets my whole life, and my eating disorder was the biggest one. And I'd gone through so many loops and hoops, and just everything that I held dear to me was just this thing that I knew was also killing me. And I thought that, if people were to really know who I really am, that's like the fear of rejection we risk our lives to protect it because we think it's going to kill us to let go of this thing that has protected us our whole lives. And I remember every time I showed up, the you know the parts that stand out to me are not the hard parts. Actually, you would think that they do, but it's the moments where I was able to speak a truth about, a behavior or some past trauma that I had never told anybody. And I kind of am obsessed with that, like that feeling of like, this is what I'm all about. Like, I want to be a therapist for this very reason. It's the most beautiful thing when someone can trust you with their vulnerability. And so I feel like the hardest parts of my eating disorder journey and just my life have built me up to be exactly who I am. It's like an equal and opposite reaction. As hard as it was, that's how passionate about I am. That's how much I care. And so it's almost like this. I always think about it, how ironic that, I didn't think I was going to live past 30 years old, and I didn't have any hopes and dreams for myself. I cared about nothing, and nothing mattered because, like you said, it was bleak. It was hopeless. And all of these things that secretly I thought, okay, one day I've been protecting my eating disorder for this long. If I look the way I was told that I should look in order to receive love, and as long as I'm perfect, then one day I'm holding out for this like just I'm gonna have it all. I'm gonna finally feel the love and acceptance and connection that I've been longing for. And it never happened. That never happened with my eating disorder. Well, what a shocker. But every time I was able to kind of like see myself in the hardest moments of my journey and then be like, I'm going to show up for myself. I'm going to show up, like, the smallest way of showing myself compassion, smallest way of, like, yes, I don't have anything else but my meal plan. And so today I have nothing else to do but complete my meal plan. And then, like, to be an adult and to think like I have nothing else but this meal plan, it feels like, it's like, wow, what has my life become? And when you show up for yourself in those ways that are scary, and, like, I'm afraid of the weight gain, I'm afraid of failing, I'm afraid of all of these things, and you show up for yourself anyway, um, like, it will amount to something and compound to something that is worth living for. And now I dedicate my life to just giving back and, inspiring hope any way I can. And I never thought that I'd get there. If you asked me 5 years ago, I'd be like, no, that's a different person. That's a different lifetime. So I think it's those hard moments that got me exactly where I am today.
Similar to Esther, I didn't think I would make it to my 30s. I'm gonna try not to cry through this. But I turned 31 yesterday, and when I got out of treatment 5 years ago, I was so suicidal. I did not want to be here. And I had a plan, I was ready to go. And it's not a matter of willpower or not being selfish or thinking of other people in your life and how you would impact them if you go. That's not where your mind is. You're just in so much pain, and the ultimate escape is just not existing. And so what helped me was ketamine, and that saved my life. And sometimes, or all the time, we need other people and we need help, and we can't just force ourselves to. I know this theme is creating a life worth living, but I also don't want to kind of romanticize this and be like, if you just find something you're passionate about, or find the right community, or go into nature, you can recover, or like you'll find a life that you care about and want to live for. That's not always how it works, especially when you're in such deep darkness and you feel like there is no alternative than just ending your life. So for me, I needed a drug to help me, and I needed my family. And not everyone has access to that. So I want to acknowledge that it's not accessible for everyone. And also I had a perspective shift on suicidality and suicidal ideation and self-injury, because instead of viewing it as, because I struggled with self-injury since I was 4, and it was viewed as this very scary thing, and it is scary, and I scared my parents. But eventually I shifted into like, it doesn't have to be this very scary thing, because I had some people in my life not treat it like that. When I went to treatment and came to someone after I self-injured, they were like, do you need a Band-Aid? And I was like, whoa, I'm used to my dad screaming at me. I'm used to teachers in high school just saying rude things about it. And to just come at it of like, yes, of course you did this because you're doing something really hard. Are you okay? Do you need medical attention? Instead of blowing it out of proportion. And the same thing with suicidality, right? Like if we tell someone like, hey, I'm thinking of suicide, and people's reaction is, oh my gosh, oh no, that's not a helpful reaction, because then people won't tell you about it. So with my current therapist, I'm so comfortable telling her like, hey, I'm having a day where I'm just like ideating about that. She doesn't send me to a crisis center. We just talk about it. And I use it as information of, I must be feeling something I really don't want to feel right now. And the same thing with my eating disorder. I viewed it as, it protected me. I don't view it as like this. I think sometimes we externalize it and it's like, oh, it's Ed. It's this like ex-boyfriend that's really toxic. And that works for some people. But for me, I viewed it as, this is something that tried to help me. Kind of like this like gnome. I view it as like this garden gnome that's like doing its best, and it's like not sustainable, but it tried really hard. Because I had PTSD, I had trauma, I didn't have the tools to feel what I was feeling. So yeah, if I restrict food, I don't have to feel that. And that protected me. That worked for a long time until it didn't, So I view my eating disorder and suicidal ideation and self-injury as all things that they were trying to protect me. It's what I knew. It's all I knew until I also started DBT and I do radically open dialectical behavior therapy. It's very skills based. And now I have tools. If I feel the urge to self-harm, I put ice over my eyes and it's the same. It lowers my heart rate immediately. It's incredible. And so now that I have that tool, I don't have to go over there, and it doesn't happen right away. Like it takes a while to like groove in a new pathway in your brain, but now I do have that tool. And so I think my overall message is, if we can shift our perspective of these things don't have to be so scary, let's talk about them like we're doing now. And I also, another thing, going back to like, I think we're putting a lot of the onus on the individual to come out and be very vulnerable. And I 100% agree, like eating disorders thrive in isolation. We should be talking about it. If you want to recover, my advice is go tell someone what you're struggling with, but also let's be that person that goes to someone that we see might be struggling and tell them we see you. Because I think we're so nervous to be like, oh, I think that person might be struggling with food or exercise, and we don't want to say anything. And I lost a friend because no one said anything to her, and she was just withering away, waiting for someone to say something. So that's what I want to do now. I think a lot of us in this community, that's what we're doing, is we're see something, say something. We have to say something. And be that yoga teacher that's going to lay out a mat for you, Chelsea, or just be that one person that's going to be like, hey, I see that you're hurt yourself. Are you okay? Do you need a Band-Aid?
It's beautiful, Amanda. I have the pleasure of working with Amanda regularly, and one of the reasons I absolutely love, among many, is that she comes out with things like my eating disorder is a garden gnome. She's just one of the funniest things I've ever. That's amazing. I will use that. I will lean into that. Thank you, Amanda, for that excellent visual. So, having said that, gosh, I've got to answer my own question, which is a tough one. Um, I mean, I, like Amanda, went through, I mean, every person's story is really different here, but where we are similar is I had periods where I absolutely did not want to continue on. I was done. I felt like my body was broken. Like I felt like everything had broken in my life. I had no social relationships left. I dropped out of school. So my education was withering. My family, I was an adolescent, and my family had completely and utterly fallen apart. And then, having had an eating disorder for 7 years, my body fell apart. I couldn't walk. I my bladder was no longer working. I was in diapers. It was horrible. It was horrific. And I felt like, why would I continue? Nothing. I also didn't see an end to that. I thought, I have broken my body and it's never going to get better. I'm never going to be able to walk again. What is there left? And where Amanda and I's story is different. I mean, one, they definitely did not have ketamine infusions back then. And I was an adolescent, so I'm not sure they would have given it to me anyway. But I mean, the gift is I really didn't have a choice. I was involuntarily hospitalized. I was put onto a locked unit and kept there for a long time. And I mean, again, I think where that started, I fought for a long time. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to get better. I didn't want to continue. And I was angry because I felt like the one thing I should be able to do is decide when my own life ended. That was my, call me crazy, which they have. But this is, autonomy 101. Don't I get to make a choice here? The reality is I was in no position to be making that choice. I can't really tell you what shifted. Time, love, care, but I can tell you I was wrong. My body did get better. My life got so much better. And I don't know why or how. It was time. It was a series of experiences, but it didn't stay static. Nothing, like the one thing is that nothing stays the same. And so I don't know that I can answer my own question very well, but what I can say is if you're in that place, I think it's worth continuing on. I think you can't see the future, and I honor how fucking hard it is. You know, I honor how terrible it is. And I'm not saying just, stay stagnant. I think, stay open and continue. But I think what I didn't know before is that something that felt so permanent changed so radically. And sometimes just a series of tiny, tiny things that just added up over time. Yeah.
I'm gonna be really honest. I don't even remember what the question was. I've gotten so like captivated by all of this that I'm like, wow, I don't even remember where it started.
How did you go from bleak to not bleak? There's this in the bleakest moment, from bleak to having a life worth living.
Incredible. Thank you, Chelsea. Wow. I mean, you saying time just is like truly the only thing that keeps like coming back to, because I'm like, I don't remember there being like a specific, instance that I was like, oh, I don't feel like this, because I still have waves that it comes in that I'm just like, there's so much pain and I feel so much pain and I see so much pain around me that like, I still do have days that it's really difficult to do things that I want to do. But I know that, yeah, just through the amount of time that I've had pass where I know that I felt that way before, it kind of goes back to my original, I think my first question I answered was that like, I've done it before. I've gotten through those days. I now feel comfortable sitting in them and saying like, this is super uncomfortable and I hate it and I don't want to feel this way. And I'm going to let myself, because that's how I know that I'm going to be able to move through it. And if I stay lamenting in it, if I stay silent about it, if I don't tell anyone, if I continue on in that, like, I'm probably not going to feel better. But if I say something about it, and if I can say, hey, I'm really struggling right now and it feels really dark, then I know that I like know the steps that I have to take to get myself from there to be safe. And that is honestly like, wow, it's so hard to do. I'm like, wow, it's really challenging when you're in that to be able to say like, and I'm going to choose to do this another day and I'm going to keep doing it and I'm going to make my day as easy as possible from here on out and let myself be comfortable and allow the time to pass and to shift and to not place too much ownership on like, okay, well, it needs to change now so I don't feel this. It's saying like, okay, I can be uncomfortable and I can be holding this pain and also see like the both end of it. Of just like, I can hold it and I can also hold on to the belief in my data that I have collected that I have felt this way and that I have felt differently again. And just kind of clinging back to that. Yeah, the data just kind of brings me back to that piece and that place. Ooh, wow. I'm feeling very,
Ooh, I know it's a
yeah,
deep one, isn't it? It's a lot.
yeah,
Can I go to an audience question just because,
please.
is that okay? Can I, because there's a really good one here and it relates actually to what you're saying, Lydia, and it came a little bit earlier, but I also know we're short for time. We've got, so the question is, I want to get better, but change is so hard. I feel stuck. How did you get out of the rut?
I have my response to it. I don't like the answer, but I have it. For me, it was doing it. It was doing the things that I was like, I see what I have to do. I'm not happy about it. I'm going to stomp my feet. I'm going to cry. I'm going to scream. I'm going to do all of my emotional outbursts and I'm going to still do it. Like it felt to me like I was like, I can keep doing what I'm doing. I have that data as well. Like I know where I'm going to end up if I keep engaging in these things. And I think I just had to get like I like being like very raw with myself. I don't like to do it usually with other people. There's still like a level of that that's like uncomfortable. But with me, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm like, I have to take the steps. I have to be willing to just like be uncomfortable. And my eating disorder was already so uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable and miserable all of the time. So I was like, I might as well just switch it up and be miserable and uncomfortable in a different direction. And I got here. So I'm very happy with that outcome. But it was just like coming back to that basic thought for me of just like, I have to do it. Like this is the option that I have, and I'm just going to push myself through it and rely heavily on my community around me for me to vocalize that it's really hard and I'm really scared, and for them to say like, we see that and we got you and you're not going to be alone during it. And continuing that until I think I got to the place where I was like, cool, I feel steady enough to do this on my own, but really coming back to that, like the rawness of like, I have to do it. This is gonna be my choice. This is gonna be the step that I have to take, and I'm gonna confront it and move through.
I wanted to quickly add to what you said, Lydia, because I think there's this huge black and white element to eating disorders. And for me, I felt very frustrated about all that I had to do and everything, every step along the way. Oh my gosh, it's just this giant. There was this diagram that I saw in like on this worksheet, and I was like, when you see it, it's one of those like, oh, life is like a mountain, and when you think you've reached its peak, you just realize that you reached a little, and usually you're like, yeah, obviously, but like I saw it on one of those days where it kind of just hits, and you're like, I was like, oh my gosh, like every step of it is going to be hard, but that's the point is you have to take a step. And something that I always remind my mentees is let's focus on one thing. I know the eating disorder is telling you let's do it all, but let's just do one thing and just do that and do that. Like if I had to commit myself to meals, and it might not seem like much, but there's a physical and scientific element to eating. Our bodies are fueled by food, and everything that we're trying to embark on entails energy. And it's the hardest aspect of someone with an eating disorder to be like, yeah, I'm going to do all of this work and I'm going to eat along the way. Like I was around so many peers who was like, can I get to the recovery part, but I don't want to eat. I don't want to do the weight restoration or balance, like, getting my body to trust that it's going to be nourished consistently. I don't want to do that part. And a huge part of that, I think, is a trust fall, because a lot of my mentees are like, well, I'm scared. I'm scared of like, what if my body betrays me once I'm on a regular meal plan? And I'm like, look, you've tried the other thing before. And, I always refer back to the Minnesotan starvation study in the 60s, and I'm just like, these healthy men who had no mental or physical kind of ailments, they were put into this 6-month program where they were on a very low calorie diet, and to see how to restore like the population's health during the war. They got these men on these low calorie diets that I was presented with in magazines when I was a child. Like we have no business being on this amount of calories, but this was like they never done it before. And what they found was every single one of these men exhibited eating disorder symptoms. And some of them were able to get their, lives back. Some never got their lives back. Some took a very, very long time. That's a 6-month period. And so I remind them like, yeah, it's a lot to, like trust that eating is going to solve a lot of our problems, but trust me, it's going to solve at least the parts where, the sleep is messed up and we don't have the energy throughout the day. So it just manifests in binges or, restrictions. It's too much for our bodies to handle. So, it's a trust fall, and it's just one step at a time is my bullet point there.
Esther, I resonate with so much of what you shared today, and also Lydia, what you were sharing before around, just some part of the hard part is there's just a, close your eyes and do it, or a trust fall, which is just really, it's a really frustrating answer. I know why you said, Lydia, I don't want this to be the answer. The only thing I will add that maybe just adds another angle to it, kind of similar to your diagram, Esther. There's a comic that I use in a lot of my trainings, which is really simplistic, but also so true. And it's this guy laying on a couch in front of a TV, and there's a thought bubble that says "get up," and then there's another bubble that comes out of his body that says "no." And the concept is like your brain or your mind wants to do it, but your body is saying no. I think one of the things that I mean, obviously I've started a whole organization that brings yoga into eating disorder therapy. So obviously I really care about this, but the reason is I was I was really surprised at how much getting my body involved in the recovery process and the mental health process made a difference, because my mind was so messed up. And for a lot of the reasons that Esther spoke about, I was malnourished, I was dysregulated from lots of past trauma, I was dysregulated from treatment itself sometimes. And there was something about yoga that started to do some of the work of like started to all that work I was doing in therapy started to I started to, I mean, it sounds so hokey, so I'm trying to find a different way to say it, but I can't. I started to actually embody it, that whole self-soothing instead of turning to an eating disorder behavior of manage like I used to have panic attacks in yoga, like I really like full on panic attacks, and I had that yoga teacher, I wanted to leave, I was ready to go. She's like, stay. This is why we practice yoga. This is literally it. But getting my body involved in it. Um, it was really different than the work I was doing in therapy, because it wasn't just talking about it cognitively, it was practicing it. And I don't really understand what happens in yoga, but there's some stuff that I don't understand. There's stuff going on there that I just started to feel better, and it got easier to get out of that rut. I would come out of yoga class and I would feel like a different person after 45 minutes of mostly being in one place and breathing, which is weird. I don't know why that worked, but it did. So if you're in that rut, the only thing I would add to the you just got to do it piece is maybe see if you can get your body involved in some way. And that might mean taking an ice cold shower when you don't feel like you can get out of bed. It might mean going outside and feeling the sunlight on your face when you're feeling completely dead to the world. It might mean going and digging your feet under the ground into the soil, bare feet, when you're feeling really anxious or panic attacky. And it might mean starting a yoga practice if you're feeling really stuck. But that's like advanced level. I'm assuming you're super stuck. So start with the simple basics. But I really found that I mean, it's an eating disorder. It lives in your body. There's no way around it. You got to bring the body in. You can't just think your way out of it. So I would see if you can incorporate the body in recovery.
I just wanted to add really quick. I think I know why yoga works. It's just my own theory. Because let's bring it back to DBT. One of the skills that they teach is to tolerate our distress. And a lot of tools that they give us is to sit in that discomfort. And a lot of the time when my urges were very high, it's because I was feeling something age old, in my body that I just didn't want to feel. And I had just taught myself like feeling behavior. There's no space in between. And yoga, there's a long period where you're just sitting there. You're not like sitting there with like things around you. You're there with your mat. And I loved this scientific fact. A lot of checking the facts helped me. And when I learned the science behind our body works, that really helped me when I had emotions and, urges and stuff. And deep out breaths are what actually trigger our rest and digest. And so when we're able to get those longer, deep out breaths, that's when our brain gets the trigger. We're safe. And of course, I'm going to say that the yoga, of course, needs to be paired with a nourished body, consistently nourished body. There's no getting around that. And when we're nourished and we can trigger that like rest and digest the parasympathetic nervous system instead of the fight or flight all the time that we're probably all very much aware of and used to being in, that's when we can kind of show our bodies that like, I saw a comment like, trust that our bodies aren't going to betray us. Our bodies want to trust us, and our bodies want the signals that it can trust us and that it's safe. But we have to consistently give it cues that it's safe. And breathing is one of the best techniques for that.
And to like piggyback off that, I think consistency throughout the day, not just during a yoga practice, because what I noticed, and I think might be pretty common with people with eating disorders, is we have very high distress tolerance. So we're always tolerating a level of distress, not feeling even the small emotions throughout the day. And I learned that as I'm tolerating all of that stress and anxiety, it builds and builds until like all of a sudden the smallest thing, then I'm having a panic attack in a yoga class. And I don't know why, because something small set me off, because I was tolerating distress for the entire day, because I'm very good at that. And I think you have to be good at tolerating distress to have an eating disorder. But we need to not be so good at tolerating distress. I was talking to my mentee about this, and she has a baby, and I'm like, it is good to tolerate distress when your baby's screaming and you need to not throw them across the room. Okay, tolerate that distress, but you don't need to tolerate the distress of, you are overwhelmed by this meal that you have to make. Can we make that easier? Can we break it down? Maybe we use some frozen foods in that meal, etc. So we don't have to tolerate that distress. Let's save up for the distress cup for not throwing our child, and then we can use the other, distress tolerance. We don't have to tolerate that. We can feel that in the moment, and that'll make it easier to not get so stuck, and then use behaviors in order to kind of manage that distress, because it's just kind of overflowing at the end of the day.
Yeah, like confronting it when it arises rather than like pushing it aside. I feel like that's what like a majority of my eating disorder was like pushing things aside until it got to that point where it was like there's too much happening and now it's like a volcano. Yeah, I totally relate. Before I ask the last question, Amanda, did you have anything else you'd like to add? I know that I just jumped in there, so.
Yeah, I think just one thing I would say that was kind of back that you were talking about actually was more of the like kind of data mined. Like I had something helpful of like treating it like an experiment. So I know what a decade in eating disorder is like. I know what that feels like. I don't know what it means to live as an adult in recovery. So I'm going to go 100% all in. If anything, this black and white thinking is going to, all or nothing thinking is going to help me for once. And I'm going to see what it's like to really go all into recovery as an adult. And, what if that sucks? What if that's uncomfortable? What if that's amazing? What if that's incredible? What if that's totally worth it? And I can go back if I want to. I reminded myself, like, if this sucks, like, great, I know how to do an eating disorder. I'll go do that. Turns out I don't want to do that. I like this. I like being an adult in recovery. But you just have to go all in. You have to do it. You can't, I think the most painful place to be that I've seen my mentees be in and I've been in is quasi recovery. You're recovered enough, it's sustainable enough to live, but it's not living. And I was just done doing that. Like, I don't have time for that anymore. I have things I want to do. I'm not going to be in quasi recovery. I'm going to go all in. It's going to be uncomfortable, but it's going to be beautiful.
That what if question is like one of my favorite things because it can go either way where I'm like, if I'm in my like negative headspace, it's like, yeah, but what if everything's terrible and all that kind of stuff. And then I'm like, but I know that's also the question I've used to get to my point in recovery that I'm like, yeah, but what if I already know the other side? And what if this is something beyond what I can, like what I could even imagine for myself? Like similarly, like I didn't see myself having like a long-term plan because I was like, I'm not going to have that. I don't have access to that. But now I'm like, well, what if I just keep doing things that are like small things, like the little things of like, what if I just go get myself a cup of coffee? And then that turns into the highlight of my day because I have a really positive interaction with someone. It's just the what if it becomes different? What if it could be different than what it is now? I know that we're in the last 6 minutes of today, which feels wild that we've already gone through almost an hour. Chelsea, I just want to see if we want to do the last question of looking back. What advice would you give to someone just starting their recovery journey, especially when creating a fulfilling and purposeful life? I want to see if we want to touch on that or if we want to
That's a good
dive.
one. There's a really good one from the audience. Could we just,
Bring
I'm
it
sorry, I
in.
really want to get to, okay, sorry, because I really
Bring
want
it
to
in.
answer it. I'll be really quick so if someone else has a chance as well, but it looks really, because it's something I think so many people struggle with. What tips do you have for those working hard at recovery, but held back by other complex health conditions, doing my best, but it feels hard to create a life truly the one that I want to be living, to be honest, feeling really stuck due to other health issues. I'll just really briefly answer this and I'll hand it to someone else, but because it just really resonates with me. The first thing that came up for me when I read that question is I think it's okay to grieve Like, not only that it's okay, but I think it's important. Like, whatever, I don't know what you're dealing with, but it sounds like you're mourning. It sounds like you have a vision of the life you want to be living, and you have a real health condition that is stopping you at this moment from living it. And that collides with having an eating disorder as well, you know? So it's like, it's just an extra, it just feels like an extra hit. And so I think I first just want to say that I think give yourself permission to mourn and give yourself permission to grieve, because that's just like we grieve like the end of a relationship and we're heartbroken and we want life, something to be, our reality to be different, but it's not. I think, you know, when I have breakups, I don't do breakups well. I give myself at least a permission to at least lay in bed and do absolutely nothing. And sometimes to do indulgent self-sabotaging behaviors for one day. I don't recommend doing this, but I give myself permission. You know? So I would almost say you deserve that. And I don't think it's possible to really move out of it without that grieving and mourning. And then the other thing I just wanted to say, and I don't know your particular circumstances, but something Amanda said at the top around moments of ordinary beauty, like just the moments of ordinariness. I think if we've talked a little bit about serendipity in the bits about pivot, but just I think it can be really isolating having a health condition. And I don't know if you isolate, but if you do, it might be worth opening yourself up to those little moments of ordinary joy, ordinary beauty, even when it seems really dark. And I don't know how that might show up for you, but I know that every life has those moments of ordinary joy and beauty, and looking for those, looking for, with Mr. Rogers says, look for the helpers. That's something along those. Look for the look for the helpers and look for those ordinary moments, because it may not be the life you wanted to have, but there is beauty and joy in every life. But sometimes it's really hard to see it when you're mourning. I don't know if anybody else has something to add on that.
I just wanted to add quickly, beautiful. When you were speaking, the word like radical self-compassion came to mind. It just meeting yourself where you're at is sometimes the hardest thing, especially in recovery, because you want everything to be different. And I've been there with so much chronic pain in my life, and it just felt like I was drowning and there's no hope. But I have to say, and like you said, Chelsea, I don't know exactly what this person is dealing with, and I just like it. I'm sure it's completely awful and painful. Coupled with an eating disorder, I mean, come on, like give a girl a break, give a person a break. But when I've kind of just stopped fighting it and stopped fighting the pain, just been like, oh my God, you poor thing, you're hurting so much, and I'm here for you. And I actually still do this. I will put my hand on my chest where it's skin to skin contact, where like I just want so badly for like a parent or like a loving partner to do that for me, but instead I'll do that for myself. And those little moments where you can just surrender into the pain and just be like, I got you. In whatever way you need, I got you. And from that place, then taking the shower, then making the doctor's appointment, then doing whatever we need to do, or just like you said, Chelsea, resting, truly resting instead of resting and fighting. Just giving ourselves a moment to surrender, I think, is very important.
What's coming up for me around that is like the permission to like have that self-compassion, that self-validation, to recognize the pain that you're in, and like to know that that's real and that like that is seen and heard, and like we can hold space for that, and to know that like that's your experience, and like you get to also then like create the definition of what your recovery looks like for you and what things need to be added in for you to be able to have a comfortable recovery. You know, I think that's, I know I talk a lot about with people I talk to in this community around like expectations around recovery, and that there's like people, I know for myself, I had like these like lofty visions of what it was going to feel like and look like. And then I'm like, oh, it's actually like, for me, some days are just like, it's simply living. It's like going throughout the day and doing the things. And some of that does include pain, and being able to like normalize that and say like, that's going like, if it's a chronic health condition, having that be like, that's going to be part of the journey. And it doesn't mean that it can't be enjoyable and it can't have times of comfort and enjoyment. I think for me, it's like collecting those times and being able to call back to them. I'm leaning hard into this data collection, of just being able to like capture those moments and those times. And to know that that's like, there's no such thing as like the best recovery or the perfect recovery. Like the perfect one is the one that you can create for yourself that's sustainable. And validating that there might be like pain might be a part of it, and to be able to like know that we're holding space for you in that experience as well. Amanda, before I wrap up, anything from you?
I can't top any of that. Good job.
Sometimes we just need the little confirmation on top. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Chelsea, for getting us all together in this space, and Melanie at Eat, Breathe, Thrive. Thank you also. And Esther and Amanda, truly, like, thank you so much for this beautiful conversation. And to everyone for joining. This was I know we all got emotional. I'm sure there's a lot of emotions in the crowd too, and just know that we're holding space for where everyone is at, and really grateful that you're all here to join us here in this physical space and also here in the world. And thank you everyone for showing up.
Thank you so much, Lydia. It was a joy to be with you all today. And we will have a recording for anybody who joined late in your inbox in the next week or so. And we will let you know as soon as the next one is announced and coming up. So thanks so much, everyone.